I don't know what compelled me to finally share this, but I've been thinking about it a lot the past few days and thought it would fit this sub relatively well. When I was about 8 years old, my parents were going through a divorce, and myself and my older sister used to spend a lot of time at our grandparents' house. It's a long, ranch-style home on a corner in a very nice neighborhood that's a 10-minute walk from a gas station, grocery store, and a few fast food restaurants. The streets are long and lined with well-manicured houses, cradled by big, scenic California Valley hills all around. We were never very wealthy, but my grandpa bought it as a fixer-upper many years ago, and the property value has skyrocketed since then. As you can imagine, it's a very safe spot, and although there weren't many other kids in the neighborhood, it wasn't uncommon to see neighbors walking their dogs or pushing a stroller down the sidewalk outside our house. Although my mom was especially protective all our lives, this particular neighborhood was densely populated, and my family knew just about everyone who lived there. She grew up in that neighborhood herself, so she was understandably trusting. She would once in a while let me and my sister walk to the Rotten Robbie gas station on the other end of the block to grab a snack. I would always get a ring pop, and my sister would grab a Three Musketeers before we made our way back home. My sister was about 11 at this time, and this small amount of freedom was a really big deal to us. Nothing compared to walking down that street all by ourselves in the summertime, laughing and joking around, a couple dollar bills in our pockets. I felt like I owned the world. The one oddity I ever noticed around the neighborhood was a small camper parked on the side of the road opposite to the gas station, right along the backside of the fence of another house. It sat there in the shade like a permanent fixture, all the windows constantly covered by opaque beige curtains. I can't explain why, but it always gave me this deep sense of foreboding when I'd pass it. I was almost positive someone was living inside of it, 'cause at times I'd hear the air conditioning running as it sat stagnant in the same spot. The hairs on my neck would always stand on end as I passed it, particularly as I passed the camper door. And I'd always keep an eye on it, for fear that one day it'd swing open just as I came to pass by. I think what bothered me the most was a drawing taped to the door from the inside. It was extremely messy, a sketch of odd lines in a brown-colored pencil that was frustratingly indiscernible. I could see the outline of something, a vague shape, but could never make out what it was intended to be. I never had the nerves to stop and stare long enough to really investigate, but each time I walked by, I'd steal a glance. A year prior to the incident I'm about to describe, I was walking with my mom past the camper in the shade. We had just gone to the park nearby and, unfortunately, had to pass the camper before we could cross the street and continue walking. I didn't want to seem afraid, so I kept on walking right behind her and didn't object when she walked past it. This time, I felt a little more brave. I was frustrated not being able to decipher the drawing for so long, and while my mom was feet away, I stopped in front of the camper door and took a moment to really look at the drawing. Upon closer inspection, the paper was filthy. I remember doing a project in elementary school where we soaked printer paper in black coffee to make it look aged, and that's what it reminded me of. My mom walked on without noticing I'd stopped following her, but my eyes stayed fixed on the indistinct mass of dirt-caked scribbles until I could make out what looked to be a tiny, malformed face. My stomach turned. I immediately felt cold and disgusted as my eyes trailed over the rest of the image. I didn't know what kind of creature it was at the time, but now I can look back and say the drawing was a badly deformed fetus inside a mass of large, perfect circles, like those made by a circular ring ruler. Its face was contorted, as if in pain. It was so graphically disturbing and seemed to portray this odd sense of suffering that stuck with me for days. As a child, I didn't know how to process it, and the mental image still makes me sick to think about. I'd never seen anything like it before. Adrenaline flooded my body, and my chest hurt with fear. But I selfishly thought of my glorious little trips for ring pops, and said absolutely nothing as I followed behind my mom. This was, in retrospect, a classically terrible idea. It's one of those things you scream at main characters in movies for. Ever since, my ill feelings toward the camper had been elevated by the drawing on the door. I thought about it every time we drove by, and about a month later, my mom once again graced us with several bucks and permission to walk down to Robbie Rotten and grab our respective snacks. I thought about telling my sister about what I'd seen on the way there. But she was older and braver, and I was terrified she'd make me cross the street with her to check it out. It was a bright, sunny day, and I told myself with false certainty that nothing was going to happen. If I didn't acknowledge it, maybe it would go away. We walked past the camper, and it was thankfully uneventful. On the walk back, I was feeling more comfortable and was focused on fighting open my candy wrapper while my sister walked alongside me. We passed the camper a second time, but I didn't give it half as much thought as the first time. I don't remember what we were talking about, but I recall being interrupted mid-sentence as my sister softly yet firmly said my name. There was a distinct fear in her voice that immediately set me on edge, like a bucket of ice water. All my senses heightened, and I became aware of everything, including the sound of haphazard footsteps about 10 feet behind us. It was accompanied by a heavy rustling sound, like a heavy backpack, and nervously, I half turned my head to look. A man with a long, unkempt beard and wearing many layers of ragged clothing stood behind us, eyes unmistakably burning into our backs as he walked. His movements weren't normal. It was a drunken shuffle, like each of his feet were unimaginably heavy and needed to be moved one grand effort at a time. His shoulders were skewed, head tilted downward with a strange arch of his neck. I could hear his shoes scraping the gravel with every step, but rather than seeming genuinely intoxicated, it was as if he was intentionally meandering our direction, like a zombie with a direct effort to frighten us. Behind him, I saw the camper door was wide open for the first time in all the years we'd spent living there, and realized this was the man who had been living inside. "He's following us," I choked out, my eyes filling with tears. My mind was spinning as I stared straight ahead again, the wide street and sidewalks abnormally empty all around. My sister grabbed my hand. She squeezed it hard enough to hurt without looking my way, speaking carefully under her breath. "On the count of 3, we race home," she told me in a very serious tone of voice. I couldn't reply through the growing lump in my throat, but every single cell in my body understood that we had to put some distance between us and this man as quickly as possible. She began to count steadily while we walked faster, and the most terrifying part is that he started running before we even had a chance to. He must have heard her directions to me and tried to get a head start by sprinting our direction before she got to 3, but his footsteps were noisy, and we bolted like deer the instant we heard him behind us. I'll never forget it. The chase felt exactly like you imagine in your nightmares. The fear your pursuer is inches away from you, grabbing your arm or a fistful of your hair. I pictured myself being dragged into the van, with nobody around to see or hear me. We ran so fast, we didn't even have the breath to scream. And peering back behind me, about 10 seconds later, I saw him running our direction, with absolutely none of the impairment he showed with those zombie-like steps moments before. I think back on it now, and he may have been deliberately pretending to be handicapped to lower our guard so we wouldn't start running. The thought is terrifying, but I can't rationalize it any other way. We made it to our grandparents' house and, without looking behind us, yanked open the stubborn old door before slamming it closed and scrambling past their excited dogs to get as deep in the house as possible. I don't even think we locked it, as our main goal was getting within the line of sight of any adults as quickly as possible. My mom was talking to my grandpa at the table and gave us an amused look when we bounded into the living room. Since we were kids, running around wasn't anything out of the ordinary, and she didn't ask what happened as we collapsed on the couch and tried to catch our breath. The inside of the house felt so safe and felt in such good spirits that I didn't even want to bring up what had just happened. Like waking from a nightmare you didn't want to talk about. I was desperate to go back to normalcy. I wanted to forget it entirely, to unwrap my candy and act like everything was completely normal, for the sake of my own sanity. And that's exactly what I did. I asked my sister a few years back if she remembered the incident. I'm 25 now, and she's 28, and her response was strange. She remembered immediately, without the need for me to provide details, but she quickly waved it off and insisted he had to have been a bored homeless man looking to spook some kids walking home, with no real intent to harm anyone. I don't know. I'd like to believe it's some innocent misunderstanding, but like they always say about gut feelings, they're rarely wrong. I feel in my soul that he wanted to hurt my sister and I that day. I never told her or anyone else about the strange drawing on the door, and I'm not sure if my sister saw the open door and connected him to the camper or not. It's one of my biggest regrets, as I would hate for any other children to have been less fortunate after innocently walking past the camper in the shade. I believe he may have chosen the spot between the park and the gas station deliberately, due to the number of children walking around the area. I never saw the camper again a day or so after this. I'm not proud of how I handled this, and would encourage anyone who finds themselves in a similar situation to contact authorities immediately for the safety of others around. I don't know if maybe this whole story comes off as melodramatic, but it was very real and very frightening in a way I can't forget. So, possibly deranged camper guy by the gas station, whatever your intent was, let's not meet. Hey Reddit, this is one of those stories I debated sharing for a long time, but it's been a couple of years now, and I think I finally got enough distance to write it down properly. Also, I've seen a few posts lately about creepy delivery experiences, and while most of them made me go, yikes, they also made me feel a weird sort of solidarity. Like, yeah, people really do go through this shit. You're not overreacting. So here's mine. Let me set the scene real quick. This was during that awkward phase where most restaurants were switching to third-party delivery apps, like DoorDash, Uber Eats, and whatever else. But a few of the more old-school joints still used their own drivers. I had this local pizza place, really solid pies, nothing fancy, just good sauce, crisp crust, and toppings that didn't slide off if you looked at them wrong. It was called Tony's Pizza. Now, for context, I should probably mention I have a walking disability. I deal with a mix of chronic pain, balance issues, and fatigue, so while I can walk short distances, I move slow, and the stairs are a whole production. At the time, I was still relatively mobile, but I only used my wheelchair inside my apartment, mostly because the pain would spike by the end of the day, and it was just easier to wheel around at home. So I ordered a large pepperoni and mushrooms with a side of garlic knots, a comfort meal. I made the note in the order: please leave at door or just knock. Slow to get up. I'd had decent luck with drivers before, and I was used to people being patient once they saw me. Maybe a little awkward, but never pushy. Until this guy. He showed up maybe 40 minutes later. I was in my chair when I heard the knock. Right on time. I wheeled over to the door, took a deep breath. Getting up from the chair was a bit of an ordeal, and hobbled over to unlock it. As soon as I opened it, I got hit with this weird energy. You know how some people just immediately feel off, like they're smiling, but it doesn't reach their eyes. That was this guy. Tall, maybe mid-40s, wearing the pizza place's shirt, holding my pizza box like he was presenting it on a game show. "Hey there," he said with this forced cheerfulness. "Pizza for?" I said my name and nodded, reaching for the box, but instead of handing it over, he kinda tilted his head. "You okay carrying this? You looked like you were hurting." I smiled politely and said, "Yeah, I've got it, thanks." But he didn't move. "Why don't I just bring it in for you?" he said, stepping forward slightly. I immediately tensed. "No, it's fine. I appreciate it, but I've got it." I tried to step forward to take the pizza, but he kept moving. Just walked right past me, pushing the box into my hands, which made me step back. I stumbled a bit. My balance isn't great, and I ended up bumping into my wheelchair, which rolled slightly behind me. So now, I'm basically backed into my tiny apartment entryway, pizza box half in my arms, and this man is inside. "Wow," he said, looking around. "One-room apartment, huh? Cozy." My brain was doing that high-pitched modern screech as it tried to process what the hell was happening. "Yeah, please wait outside," I said as firmly as I could. He ignored me. "Smells nice in here. You cook a lot?" he asked. "No, I need you to wait outside," I reiterated. Still nothing. He just stood there, right in my space, looking around like he was sizing it up, like he wasn't delivering food, like he was visiting someone he knew. "Cute setup," he said. "You live here alone?" he asked. I stared at him. "Yeah, thanks for the pizza," I said, louder now. "You can go." He laughed like I told a joke, then pointed to the receipt stapled to the box. "Can I keep this?" he inquired. "Why?" I queried. "It has your number on it, right? Just in case the store needs to call it." I was floored. This wasn't normal. This definitely wasn't protocol. I knew damn well the store had my number on file. That wasn't why he wanted it. At that point, my discomfort had curled into real fear. I said, "No, I'll keep it, thanks." He didn't move, just stood there holding his delivery bag, still smiling. We were about 5 feet apart, me barefoot, half leaning against my chair, holding a pizza box like it was a shield, and him, planted in the middle of my single-room apartment like he owned it. It took 10 full minutes of awkward repeating myself, avoiding eye contact and trying not to show I was panicking before he finally left. And even then, as he stepped out the door, he turned around and said, "Hope it tastes as good as it smells." And then he said my name salaciously. He winked. I didn't say anything. I just locked the door as fast as I could. I didn't eat the pizza right away. I just sat on my couch, shaking a bit, trying to talk myself down for how unnerved I felt. I told myself maybe I was overreacting, Maybe he was just awkward. Maybe he thought he was helping. But deep down, I knew it wasn't okay. It was one of those moments where you feel like you're watching yourself from outside your body. Like, well, I thought I was safe in my own home, but I just let a stranger walk right in. I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. About 2 hours later, my phone rang. The number wasn't saved. Local area code. I picked it up cautiously. "Hello?" I said into the phone. Silence for a second, then a voice I recognized. "Hey, it's Brent from Tony's. Just wanted to check in. Did the pizza turn out okay?" My stomach dropped. He remembered my number, or wrote it down, or looked it up. I don't even know which option is worse. I froze, then said, "It was fine. Don't call this number again." He laughed like I'd surprised him. Okay, no problem. Just wanted to make sure. You seem like someone who could use a little extra care, you know? I hung up, blocked the number. Then I sat on my bed for a long time. For the next few weeks, I didn't order anything from anywhere. I didn't want to risk seeing him again. I didn't even want to go outside. I started having groceries delivered to a locker down the street instead of to my door. I avoided my front window. I kept the blinds down all the time. And even though I'd blocked his number, I was terrified every time the phone rang. I told a friend eventually, and she was the one who said, "You should report it to the store." So I did. I called Tony's a couple of weeks later when I finally got the courage. I asked to speak to a manager and told them what happened. To their credit, the manager sounded appalled. He said Brent wasn't even supposed to step inside any residence without being asked, and that calling a customer personally was a huge breach. He apologized over and over, assured me it wouldn't happen again, said Brent had been spoken to, but that was it. No real follow-up, no confirmation if he was fired, just vague reassurances. I never ordered from Tony's again, and honestly, I didn't order anything for nearly a year. I mean that literally. No pizza, no DoorDash, no Uber Eats, nothing. The idea of another stranger showing up at my door made my skin crawl. I bought a mini freezer, stocked up on microwave meals, learned how to make cheap skillet meals that didn't kill my back. Anything to avoid the possibility of that happening again. Looking back, I still think about what would have happened if I hadn't been so firm, if I hadn't stood my ground, if I'd been too scared or too polite to say no. What would he have done if I'd let him keep the receipt? What if I'd laughed at his weird comments instead of shutting them down? It scares me, and the worst part is, it's hard to prove intent. Hard to say, this is wrong, without someone trying to downplay it. Oh, he was just trying to be nice. He probably didn't mean anything by it. Maybe he thought you were lonely. No. He ignored my boundaries, entered my home uninvited, commented on my body, my apartment, my living situation, kept trying to stay, took my number or remembered it, then used it. That's not being nice. That's deliberately crossing lines. That's making someone feel unsafe in their own home. So yeah, that's my story. I'm better about things now. I use delivery apps again, but I always use aliases and fake numbers through Google Voice. I keep a camera pointed at the door. I never accept a handoff in person. It sucks that we have to think this way, but I guess I'd rather be cautious than risk another Brent situation. To understand my story, you sort of have to know a tiny bit about trespassing laws in our country. In that we don't have any, so as long as you're respectful and non-destructive, you can walk over any hills you like, and in my case, camp on any beach of your choosing, so as long as once you leave, the area is how you found it. I used to love camping when I was little. Our family would go multiple times a year with a large group of my parents' friends and their kids. On average, there were maybe 10 of us at a time, which was a bit of a logistical challenge, since we always headed out to this one really remote beach on the coast. Actually, we weren't the only ones. There's always yachts bobbing just off the shore with people in them, and other campers lining up and down the beach. Most of them also had children or teenagers, so it wasn't a wild party scene. It was very much an informal family holiday spot. There was even a small building with toilets and showers installed nearby, even though this was the middle of nowhere. I guess the local council must have figured it out and got sick of people pissing behind bushes. We took a trip up in spring 2011. I'm really bad at what time, but I know this because I got my dog in winter 2010, after picking her out that November from the shelter as a birthday gift from me to me, seeing as I paid her adoption fee. I know you guys love dogs, and she will be very important to the story later on. So let me tell you a bit about Parmesan. Parmesan came to me as a 6-month-old puppy who'd been rescued from a dogfighting situation. We're not entirely sure what breed she is exactly, but my best guess is a lurcher/staffy mix. She is a wonderfully well-tempered dog with people and most dogs, but you absolutely do not threaten her. She'll have you. So by the time of this camping trip, I'd had Parmesan for a few months. She'd never come camping with us before, but as far as my family are concerned, dogs go on camping trips. So when we all piled into the car, she came too. Unusually though, none of the family friends could make it, so it was only my sister, my dad, my mom, and myself. I didn't mind. I wasn't that attached to the other kids. I'd rather play with my dog, and I'd still have my sister. The drive took the best part of 6 hours, and because we'd left a bit later, although I don't remember why we'd left later than normal, we arrived at sunset. Not a good time to be building a tent, but we'd expected to arrive to other campers already set up, and the beach illuminated in campfires. The beach was empty. In spite of this, my parents started taking stuff out and trying to build the tent. They asked us to fetch some of the lighter bags from the boot of the car, while they sat pointing a flashlight at the sand to see properly. I rolled down the window of the car for Parmesan before getting out. It was pretty hot for that time of year, and I wanted her to have air. Always gotta be looking out for my furry little homie. As we're fumbling about in the dark on a beach in the middle of nowhere, it's pretty spooky. The one road that led to this beach was circular and had a bridge over the water, meaning you could basically circle around the beach like a big O shape if you felt like it. I wasn't really paying attention to the road. I was complaining I was tired. After maybe 15 minutes of my dad trying to nail the tent into the sand, my mom's asking him if he had seen that car drive around. It's done that a few times. My dad kind of shrugged her off. He's kind of like that. I don't know if he said anything back to her, but after a few more minutes, a car pulls up next to ours on the road, and someone got out. It was maybe 15 or 20 feet from the cars to where we were, and the light was pretty low, except for the torches. We weren't expecting to see anyone else out here at this point, and I think my mom said, "It must be the security." I don't know why a random beach would have security. I think what she meant was the wildlife trust or something, as they do occasionally come down to do their nosy. The guy was walking pretty unevenly. He must have been drunk or high, because he had that stagger to him. There was absolutely no way this guy was sober. Great. A drug addict. Not an unusual find, but it's rare to see them in the wild. As he walked into flashlight range, we realized he was carrying a large knife, maybe 15 inches long. Although I was small at the time, so maybe my sense of scale was off. I don't like my dad, but credit to him. Once he saw this, he got up immediately, holding onto the camping mallet, and put us all behind him. The man began to shout wildly at us that we can't camp here, and that he was just letting us know. My dad tried to initially be a bit low-key with the guy, and told him that was fine, we'd leave. But this didn't work. He kept coming closer to us, so my dad started shouting, and the man kept shouting back. My sister and I were crying. I remember shaking. I was utterly terrified, as I'm sure anyone would be in that situation. It really did seem like this guy and my dad were going to fight, and I'm gonna be honest, I didn't fancy my dad's chances. While it's grim to consider, I'm absolutely convinced he would have killed my dad, and possibly us as well, once he was done, as I don't think my mother would have had the common sense to run with us. I love her, but she's always put my dad and her relationship with him above us. This isn't how it went down. A bolt from the black, like a wolf descending on its prey, took us all by surprise. Most of all, the man with the knife. In that moment, Parmesan was the apex predator's large canine's representative in nature. She got him good by the arm and clamped down hard, ripping his jacket and shredding the skin underneath. He dropped the knife as it had been in the arm she'd got him by. He kicked her, he punched her, and eventually got her off. He grabbed the knife from the sand and ran back to his car and drove off. Parmesan didn't follow him. She stayed with us, muzzle covered in blood. As quickly as we could, we gathered our things and all got back in the car, all pretty shook up by the incident. I looked Parmy over. She was okay, but the car's window was much more open than I'd left it. We think what happened was when the shouting started, she must have put her paws up on the gap I'd left for her. As it was an old car and had the roll-down windows and not an electric button, we think she must have been able to hit it with her paws to force it down enough to squeeze out. This is not the end of my story. We were all pretty scared, and since we had the dog with us, we couldn't book into a hotel for the night. My parents decided to just drive home so we could all feel safe. But first we had to drive to the nearest town for fuel, as we were kind of getting low. I spent the time trying to clean Parmesan up a bit. I'd always loved dogs, but what she'd just done for me blew my mind. As we drove into town, we came across a petrol station, but it looked closed. My dad drove up closer to get a better look and stuck his head out the window to get a better look at the sign. My mom asked him what on earth he was doing, and he told her he was trying to see when it opens. Never. My heart fucking sank. Parked in the corner, behind a van, so we hadn't seen him at first, was the man with the knife. He was sitting on the bonnet of his car, using some toilet paper to clean his arm up. It looked pretty bad. Without stopping to refuel or look anywhere else in town, my dad drove right out of there. He decided to go to the next town over, but this current town was remote. The next town was over 60 miles away. He didn't have that much petrol, which we realized when we began driving. We were going to break down. That's fine, my dad said. We had AA cover. They'd come tow us home, or at least somewhere acceptable for the night. Better than staying in the last town. After driving for maybe 5 minutes, lights flash us from behind. Another car. The same car the man had been driving. It was him, following us. He must have realized we were low on petrol. The next half hour was one of the worst half hours of my life. I had a complete and utter breakdown, as did everyone really. I could tell my parents were trying to keep it under wraps so it wouldn't upset us, but we weren't really little kids. We were both double digits. We knew how dangerous this situation was. My dad turned off the radio to conserve petrol, and the man followed us for 55 miles before he peeled away onto another road. Our fuel meter was on the big red E for empty for the last 10 miles. We were driving on fumes. I don't really believe in God, but if he does exist, that was definitely one of his miracles. Once we got there, we drove into a petrol station and refilled to a full tank before driving the rest of the way home. My sister and I slept in the car after that. I only woke up once we made it all the way home. Just grateful nothing worse had happened than that. After getting some sleep, my mom phoned the non-emergency line for the police and reported what had happened. They never got back to her after that, but apparently, the woman she spoke to said they may wish to in the future, as he matched the description given of a suspect wanted in relation to a murder charge. I have no idea if he actually was that guy or just a random psycho. As I said, they never got back to her. So, what's the takeaway then? Well, for me, it's that I love Parmesan. She's still with us now, old as the hills and twice as grizzled as one of my mom's friends likes to joke. I don't know why she did what she did that day. I couldn't tell you what her thought process was. What I do know is that this poor puppy was born into an environment where they abused and neglected her, only to be rescued and taken to a shelter where her mother and siblings all found homes before her. Despite how badly people had treated her, when I took her home, she forgave but never forgot. I think the saying is, I never trust a person who doesn't like a dog, but I always trust a dog when they don't like a person. They have a very good understanding of human body language, and I think she must have understood how much danger we were in. If you're able to, please adopt. You might find yourself in a situation like mine one day. I promise you, if you're willing to save a four-legged friend's life, they will pay you back tenfold if they're able to, without a thought for their own safety. I paid £78 for Parmesan's adoption fee, which is a lot when you're a kid, but it chills me to my bones, knowing if I hadn't been so insistent on a dog, I might be dead. About 2 years ago, I moved into a new apartment. The walls were very thin, and because of the fire safety laws in my city, my bedroom had one window, which led into the living room, and none with outside access. The window will be important later. It was 3 bedrooms, one for me, one for the master tenant, and one spare, which at the time was rented out by a pretty friendly guy. Well, friendly guy had issues with his work visa and had to move back to Canada last minute, leaving us about 2 weeks to find another roommate. Our quickest and easiest option was Craigslist. Due to my work schedule, I had no part in the selection process, but was content when the new roommate moved in a little later. He seemed a bit off, but friendly. He was a very tall, large guy, but pretty quiet, and not someone I wanted to go out of my way to hang with, but was okay to be around and be cordial with. About 2 weeks into his move-in, the master tenant left for Hawaii, leaving him and I alone in the home for the month-long duration of his stay. For the first few days, things are normal. All of a sudden, about 4 days into the trip, I'm woken up at about 8 a.m. to a frantic knocking at my door. My roommate, Kyle, is standing there when I open up, looking frazzled. He looks me dead in the eye and says, "So do you want to tell me what went on last night?" To which I was shocked and confused, because I'd come home from work at about 9 p.m., and immediately showered and went to bed. I explained this to him, and he tells me that he heard me screaming and arguing with someone in my room, that he saw me in the side alley out the window, arguing with our landlord, whom I'd never seen at that point, that he heard people coming in and out of our house. I tell him no way, none of that ever happened. After staring at me for a little longer, he leaves and doesn't bring it up again. The next morning, I woke up to the same thing. This time, he says he saw me arguing with my boyfriend. I was single at the time, that he'd seen me talking with our roommate, who's currently in Hawaii, and asking me for the badge number of the officer I'd spoken to, since he'd apparently seen me talking to a bunch of police as well. This time, I get angry and more or less tell him to cut this shit out, because I'm not doing anything and I don't know what he's talking about. He gets a weird look on his face and says, "I think I had a seizure in my sleep." The next time it happens, call an ambulance, and leaves for a bit, only to start knocking again about an hour later, and when I open up, Kyle repeats the exact same story verbatim. This happens once more before I tell him to leave me the fuck alone, and then leave for work. I go to work as normal, and I'm reluctant to return that night, but I'm too tired to switch to an alternate location. Big mistake. About 1 a.m., I wake up to slamming doors. Kyle is pacing back and forth between his bedroom, the living room, and out the front door, walking in and out of each room, turning the lights on and off, mumbling angry and slamming the doors. I can see his figure pacing back and forth through the frosted window in my room that leads to the living room. Since my room is dark, he cannot see inside. Suddenly, he screams, "I can't live like this. Why are you doing this to me?" I think he's on the phone and don't respond. A few moments later, he screams my name repeatedly, and I realize he's directing it towards me. I knew I had to get the fuck out of there, so I very quietly creep out of bed and start getting dressed and packing a bag of clothes for work in the morning. I'm almost done when he screams, "I hear you," and charges over to my room, slapping the wall next to my door, but not touching the door itself. I look towards my window and see his shadow lean all the way forward, pressing his ear against the glass. I was fucking terrified and sat completely still, unmoving. He eventually screams my name again and moves away from the window, and I hear him start pacing between rooms again. Now, my shoes are kept on a rack outside my door and not inside my room, so I know that when I leave, I'm gonna need a moment to put them on. I decide to wait until his pacing takes him out the front door again, at which time I plan to grab my shoes, put them on, and run. As I'm formulating this plan, the pacing stops. He screams, "Do you want to fucking fight about this? Come out right now and we'll fight, I swear to God." I'm a very small 5-foot girl, and this guy is easily 3 times my size, so I am definitely not looking to fight, thanks. After a few minutes, he turns all of the lights off, and I hear the door to his room open and close, followed by silence. I wait for a moment to be sure I can't hear any movement, and then decide to take my chance. I took a breath and pulled my door open quickly. I step out and grab my shoes before I look up a second later and see him standing shirtless with just a pair of boxers and socks on, just standing there in the dark of the hallway. His arms hung slightly outward in an awkward position. He says in a low, calm voice, "Ma'am, we need to talk." That's a hard no from me, so I grab my shoes and run out the door with them in hand. I run about half a block barefoot before I stop to put them on. When I look back, he's standing in the porch light of our front door, watching me run, but not moving. Luckily, I had a friend who lived 2 blocks away, and I had their spare key, so I let myself in and crashed there for the night. And that's where I stayed for the next week or so while we worked things out with the master tenant, and Kyle agreed to move out within the next week. He says he doesn't remember anything that happened, or wasn't sure if it was real or not. But if I said that's what went down, then it must be real. The day Kyle left, he sends me a photo of the house keys sitting on the table and says, "I'm out. Nothing else." I take a friend over there with me to scout it out and ensure that he has actually left. When we get there, we discover that not only had he left a ton of food and furniture, but he had ripped all of the fire alarms out of the ceiling. He had unscrewed and removed the deadbolt to the front door and left them lined up neatly on the front table. We then realize that my front door can only lock by using a key from the outside, and it had been locked when we arrived, meaning Kyle still had a key. We called a locksmith immediately. Even after changing the locks, I was still terrified to stay there alone afterwards, and I never went to sleep at night without barricading the doors with chairs and other furniture. To this day, I still fear for his safety. He was obviously psychologically unstable, but I also wonder what could have happened if I hadn't been as lucky as I was. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that. If you have a scary story you'd like me to read on the channel, please send me an email or post it to my subreddit. You can find details of this in the video description. It's the stories that make this, and this is the best way to ensure variety in the stories I share. Thank you all for listening, and a special thanks to my channel members and patrons who now have special access to ad-free videos and other behind-the-scenes content. Once again, thank you guys for listening. Have a great night.